My name is Sam Hearn. I'm the founder of the Men's Health Archive with Jake Fishman, my co-founder. And today we're sitting down talking to Daniel Graham, a woodworker from Kentucky now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Of course, man. I'm excited.
I've followed your work for a long time on Instagram, and you make some absolutely ridiculously gorgeous woodworking pieces and very cool. You make banjos and all these cool metal pieces as well. Tell us a little bit about your story.
So I grew up in a military family, so I moved around my whole life. And so the longest place I ever lived was about 2 years until I went to college. And then I went to the University of Florida for my undergraduate degree in printmaking. And so I studied stone lithography, which is like engravings and etchings on stone. And then I left the University of Florida, and in the summer I had this job in DC where I worked at a frame shop doing framing and basic woodworking stuff. And so I worked up there, and then after graduating school, I went up there and did an apprenticeship in furniture making. And then ran that guy's shop for about a year and a half after my apprenticeship. And then went back to school because the whole plan all along was to teach college. And so I went back to school at the University of Georgia to get my master's so that I could teach. So finished up my master's and then ended up getting this job in Kentucky. And I always tell it as a joke, but it's always serious. Is like I kind of lied to people here because I thought I'd stay here for a couple of years and leave. I never stopped in Kentucky except for gas. Like that was the only reason to stop in Kentucky. And so I genuinely thought I'd be on to like bigger and better things, you know, in my head. And that was 13 years ago. And I, you know, after I kind of spend my life on and kind of invest in. And so it's a really unique kind of place. It's a weird little school, but because it's small, you get a bunch of students that you wouldn't get at bigger schools. And you get experiences that you wouldn't have at bigger places. And I kind of feel like, you know, I don't know y'all's belief systems or whatever, but, you know, like my wife and I always say we feel like God brought us here for a reason. And at first it was because we thought I was going to start our family here. I have two little kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And we thought this was a great place to start a family, then leave. And then after being here a long time, I realized that we're kind of here to protect me from myself. Because I think if I was at a bigger institution or somewhere else, I think I'd get too greedy. I think I'd be too egotistical. And I think I'd be a really crappy dad, you know? So I think the place here has kind of protected me from being myself in a way.
It's interesting. What drove you from the beginning, knowing that you wanted to get into this woodworking and working with your hands, drove you to the teaching side of it rather than the professional craftsmanship side?
Well, my mom was a craftswoman. She was a basket maker and a calligrapher and stuff. And my dad was kind of a fix-it man. So I was always around like making stuff work, you know, and how problem solving was so important and how trying to fix things and not throw them away was always valued, you know? And so I grew up with that. And when I went into school, I wanted to be an engineer originally. And so I went into the University of Florida for engineering. And I didn't even take a class in it. I looked at the catalog and I was like, we're done. Like, I'm good. I have no interest in any of the math classes. Like, no, I just want to make the cool stuff. You know, that was what I wanted to do. So I also enjoyed tattooing and drawing tattoos for people. And so I thought I wanted to be a tattooer for a while. But I realized very early on that I would never be home for dinner if I was a tattooer. And I would never be able to, if I didn't have kids, I wasn't married. But I thought if I ever got married, I wouldn't be home for dinner. And if I ever had kids, I'd never be able to read to them in bed. And that was a big enough problem that I never pursued that career. So
that's incredibly thoughtful.
Well, it really bothered the crap out of me to think about my kids growing up that I didn't even have yet. I didn't have a wife yet. But sure, like if I ever had kids, I would hate for them to not have a dad at night. That really bothered me. And so, and also I never picked the music. That really bothered me also. So, so I went, but I thought I'd go into art, thinking graphic design, letterwork stuff. And I had a teacher there in a foundational art class at the University of Florida. Her name was Monica Lidman. And she's a genius. She's crazy insane, like just intense. She has a starfish-shaped tumor in her head on top of her brain. And they didn't know if she would live through the semester. And because of this tumor, she just said whatever she wanted. She did not care because, if you think you're going to die next week, it doesn't matter what you say to anybody,
Lay it all out there.
Yeah, and so like I vividly remember we had to introduce ourselves and tell a story. And so we get up and I tell a quick story about myself, and she's like, okay, next person. And the next person gets up and she had like a real Valley Girl talk, and she was like my name is like, and she said like 5 times before her name. And the teacher said, your name is Prom Queen and you can sit down. And she called her Prom Queen for the whole semester. Like, that was it. So she was this real awesome girl, but she thought so differently, and she thought outside of anything I'd ever seen before. And she literally kind of changed my life about how I viewed things and what I wanted to make and the reasonings for them. And so I really wanted to be that for other people that didn't have that opportunity. And the woodworking thing kind of just fell in my lap. Like I said, I was working at a frame shop. The owner of this place, it had a wood shop, a frame shop, a photo studio. It was like a craft center. And he came up to me one day and he's like, hey, I have good news, bad news. I said, what's that? He said, well, bad news is Ryan, our woodworker's leaving. And I was like, oh, no. And he said, good news is I'm hiring you. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have any experience, and thank you, but no thank you. And he said, well, I'd rather hire you because I like you rather than hire some guy I don't know how I like. And so I was 22 at the time. And so he gave me this job that, they ended up kind of butting into what I do. So, yeah. So that's kind of
what was that like? At such a early age, you had exposure to all these arts, but you didn't learn to use a power tool until the age of 20s.
Yeah.
Was there any? Well, was it scary?
No.
Was your confidence low? Anything like that?
No, it was this weird opposite thing because, like I said, I was in printmaking, and so as long as you have running water, everything's fine. You don't use electricity. You don't use anything else. So it was on the same floor as the graphics design department in my school, and so the power would like brown out, and you'd hear screams coming out of the rooms next door, and we would just kind of look up and be like, "Okay, keep going," And so when I got into woodworking, it felt the same way. Everyone's like, "Where's your big saw?" I was like, "You don't need that. Like, I don't understand. Like, I could buy a $7,000 table saw, really cool, or I could spend $1,000 and buy every hand tool I ever need."
It's true.
It'll take me a longer time, but I'll learn more about my limits, myself, my quality, because I'm not depending upon some other tool. So if it doesn't cut a straight line, it's not the tool's fault, it's my fault, So I kind of got exposed to both those sides, but I really enjoyed the hand tool side just because it's kind of like going to the gym. You learn a little bit about yourself, your limits. You can challenge, I want to keep them all. But yeah. So it has to be a healthy balance.
That's a very interesting way to go about it, because I know from my standpoint, I'm a woodworker as well. I've always loved power tools, but there's something very beautiful to the good sharp chisel or a nice plane.
Yeah.
And exerting yourself at certain times, taking a piece and saying, I'm going to cross cut this with my handsaw rather than a table saw.
Right.
I've been a boat builder for many years now because it's such a difficult task and it's very reflective. And I think it's very interesting that you're steadfast in your ways of using these hand tools, and because you seem like a very thoughtful man so far. What do you spend your time thinking about when you are working on a piece? Are you constantly focused on the actions you're making, or are you letting your mind wander and giving yourself a little therapy kind of thing?
Well, I have the attention span of an adolescent squirrel. Like I'm an ADHD kid, and so I grew up with that as part of my character, and which I really enjoy. I don't know if other people around me enjoy it. I really don't care, but I enjoy it. So I enjoy the tangent. I enjoy kind of following where the rabbit trail kind of goes. So when I'm working, usually it's in spurts. I can't sit down and work for like 6 hours, 7 hours in a row. That's just not who I am. That's also why I enjoy teaching, because I'll have students interrupt me all the time, and I enjoy that, So like this rabbit that I'm carving, I'll work on it for an hour and do something else, work on it for an hour. So I work on another banjo, work on something else. So I always have other things going on. But it is a way of getting the body to go into autopilot in some way so that your mind can kind of free up. I really hate running, but I understand running. Like I was a wrestler in high school and college. And so I understand running, and I understand physical exertion and what that does in a good way to your body and to your spirit. But especially running, when your body can just do what it needs to do, so your mind can kind of just let go as well. And I think woodworking does that a lot for me. I find myself being more patient and thinking more about myself and my family and self-improvement. And I always say, like, you end up trying to make something, but it ends up making you more often than not, And going back to power tools, like power tools don't do that because it's quick. I can run downstairs, cut it all, do it all. I can make a table in a couple hours. Not a problem. Mm-hmm. But if I want to make a table that my kids are going to pass down to their kids, I don't want to do that. I want something else to be in it. And I don't know about you as a boat builder and a woodworker, but, and maybe you could speak to this, is there's this element of time that when you can feel it, like an old boat or an old something made, and you can feel the age of that object, right? And you can't feel that from something from IKEA, and it's not the time. It's just, it's inherent to what you're making. So like my kitchen table, that was important for me to make for my family. I made a kitchen table. I made our beds. I made everything in our house that I could. Some of them that were threatening, like we needed a shoe rack by the front door, and my wife was like, "I'm gonna go to Target and pick something up." And I was like, "No, I'll make something." She's like, "We need it now," and I was like, "Give me a few days." She's like, "If you don't do it by then, like I'm going to Target." I was like, so I had to make a bench and something in the hallway because I didn't want something from Target that my kids would grow up remembering, I want them growing up remembering things that someone made. I think that's important.
Do you have a lot of objects in your family from your mother or your father that have been passed down in such a way?
No. And maybe that's probably why I do it. I don't know. I don't think I have anything. It's weird. I have things that I don't want. Like, I don't know if you guys had, like, my great-great-grandfather's shotgun. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't really hunt, and it's awesome, and I can never shoot it because it'll probably blow up in my face.
Right.
Thanks. But it also gave me an opportunity to make something for future generations and for my family. Because I think if I had something from my parents, I'd pass it down to them, and I'd miss something, So, I don't know. Do you guys have anything from your family that you treasure or value, like an object?
To be honest with you, it's clocks and tables, wooden clocks and wooden tables.
Yeah. I'll take clocks. My grandfather was a clock repairman, and so I don't know if you'll hear it go off. If you ever see me do anything in my shop, I have like 4 or 5 of his clocks around here that keep time, and so I understand those. I like those. Yeah, that's good.
What about you, Jake?
I got nothing. Hey. Nothing passed down, but.
Well, it's funny because there's like this reversal because like our grandparents had still that leftover Great Depression. I'm going to save everything because everything has a potential purpose. And then our parents, when they realized there was less of that threat, they became the generation that threw everything away. And so even if they wanted to pass something down, a lot of times there's nothing there.
Right.
Yeah.
With all this woodworking in your family, it seems like the two interjoin a lot, to be honest with you. And from what I've seen on your profile, you've spent a lot of time with your children, either outside of the shop or sometimes getting involved with your kids in these kind of tasks.
Yeah.
What's it like to be able to take something that you love and is so introspective and therapeutic to you, and not only pass down the items that go to these kids, but the thoughtfulness and the appreciation and the craft that goes into these items as well?
Well, I think it's funny because I think I over romanticized it for years.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, so whoever you grow up with, whoever your parents are, you think that's normal, right?
Sure.
So I did an art exhibition years ago where I made 5 18-foot rowboats that hung from the ceiling, and they were hooked to the water that moved, right? And so as the water evaporated, the boats would move and stuff would happen. And it's so funny because like my daughter's very supportive, and so she comes in the room and sees it, and she goes, "Wow, Dad, this is beautiful," and whatever. It's like, "Thanks." And my son comes in, and I'm like, "What do you think, Thatch?" And he's like, "It's boats and buckets." Like, and it was super humbling because I'm like, "That's what you think?" He's like, "Yeah." And I realized like at the time he's like 5 or 7, like at that moment in life, like I'm making a giant wild dog with braces and all this stuff, and our kids were like, "Yeah, this is what just Dad does at work. Like it's totally normal." And so I thought it'd have a bigger impact, to be totally honest. Like I thought it'd be like, man, they're so lucky that they have a dad that fixes stuff and makes stuff for them. And like, I thought that'd be awesome. But then I get home, my son's like, hey, I drew a sword on cardboard. Can you have it in wood by tomorrow? Like, and you're like, okay. So they're growing up with an expectation, more than just an experience. And with the same thing, my wife is an illustrator, so she draws all the time. And so we have drawings of our family. She draws like, I forget how many a month, of these kind of like illustrated life portraits of our family. And they're going to grow up with albums and books of illustrations from their childhood. And I'm like, that's awesome. But our kids are like, yeah, mom draws in, in her shop. It's like, so it's normal.
One day they'll appreciate that though.
Yeah. I hope that's the long game. You always play the long game, So, yeah.
On both sides, it sounds like you're giving them a lovely upbringing. Like those are gifts that they will one day understand that are truly gifts.
Well, I surely hope so. I hope that's our goal. We try and create a place. Both my kids are homeschooled for a few reasons. One, the school districts we're slated for were not the best, but mainly my daughter grew up with clinical anxiety. She struggled with anxiety for pretty serious stuff. We've been in counseling for years. My wife has had anxiety and perfectionistic kind of tendencies for her whole life. And so it was almost too intense. Like school was a little too intense for her right now. And so but when she was early on, she wanted to learn to read before kindergarten, before preschool. She's like, I want to know how to read. We're like, okay, like who are we to stop you? So when everyone's learning their letters in preschool, she could read. And so it was kind of, she was ahead of things. She didn't fit in. So we thought we're going to homeschool for a few years. And we realized one of the things that was the benefit of that was they've never had someone make fun of them in a way that was damaging to their character. They have interactions with kids. They have all sorts of activities. My son's on a climbing team. My daughter does ballet. We're involved in a bunch of community stuff. But it's none of this like kid bully stuff that I know. I was bullied heavily as a kid. And so it's really funny because they'll draw stuff and they're super proud of it when some probably third grader would be like, that's stupid. And they'd never do it again, right? So they're growing up and we're hoping that we can provide a garden, like this environment where they can grow up knowing really who they are, confidence in who they are, so that when they go out into the world and they go into public school or wherever, college or life, someone's going to say something. They're going to be like, oh, you're the one that's wrong because I know exactly who I am, And so we're trying to breathe that into a kind of our home life in what we do.
That's very nice. Have you read, there's a book called The Element. I'm blanking on the author's name, a British man, very smart. I think he's a Sir Kenneth Robinson, something like that.
Yeah, Sir Ken Robinson. Yeah. I haven't read The Elements though. I've read the, what's the other one though? Shoot. The Out of Our Minds book. I've read that one. Yeah. All
about how our education system is depriving our kids of creativity and the ability to strive and keep doing things, much because of this ability of being bullied and all these kind of things. Do you think that your experiences growing up being bullied at all shaped in any positive way where you are today? Because there is a bit of you learn the grit kind of thing, other than the
I don't know, because like being thrown in trash cans and stuff really doesn't build grit.
That's not good.
So like this is funny thing, just like war can turn a guy into a man. I think there's certain elements of that. Like I broke 100 pounds in 9th grade of high school. I was a real tiny guy. So I was an easy target.
Sure.
I came from a family that liked sci-fi, and I loved my family. I still love my family. And so, but what they were excited about, what I thought was cool and excited about, wasn't in the larger scheme of things. And so like as an example, it's really funny. I played French horn for years. And when I was in Washington, D.C., you played French horn, you got beat up and thrown in trash cans. I moved to South Carolina, and when you were in band, those were all the cool kids. For some reason,
you're in the marching band.
Yeah. You were cool people if you were in there. And so it went from like, I had a girl ask me out in 6th grade for the sole purpose of dating me for a little while and breaking up with me in front of my friends. My sister was in 8th grade, 2 years older than me, and she found out about it, told me. So I went and broke up with this girl in front of all of her friends. and then got beat up and, whatever else. So, but it's funny though, because when I got into high school, and started like wrestling, got some muscle on me, got a little bigger, grew up a little bit. It was very tempting to like go back and beat people up, it was very tempting to be what I didn't want to be. And so I think one of the things that bullying did to me was it taught me how to forgive people, because they're probably embarrassed of who they were back then. And so to show some people some grace that we all made bad decisions at one point in time, and they don't have to define us by any means. So I think bullying in some way taught me to forgive people, but it also taught me that other people's perspectives of me don't matter. So going back to art and woodworking and stuff, I was always seen as like I thought differently. Teachers thought I was a challenge. I couldn't have an attention span, couldn't sit still, all those things. And then when I'm a professor and I can hold 15 conversations at once with different students, and I can ride that tangent line and come to some crazy place to make some really interesting work, everyone's like, how do you do that? I'm like, it's because I was the rejected kid and I didn't change. If I had changed into what you wanted me to be, I wouldn't do what I'm doing now. So yeah, I think that's what it really taught me, was just to have confidence in what I really believed as myself and let them understand they're making a mistake, and that's okay.
That seems like an incredibly difficult task and like a large decision to make when everything in your life is telling you you should change. And you, like bullying, you had the opportunity to then turn the other hand. Yeah. What, other than morality of the decision, kind of made you be so thoughtful? A
number of things. Distance is one, because like I said, I moved all the time. So if when I lived in somewhere and I was like getting kind of picked on, I'd be like, okay, I just have to wait another year. And then they're all gone. I'll never see them again, And so, but then you'll end up dwindling those friends down to really good friends that you'll keep forever, or people that are just acquaintances, So it's really interesting, because I think time and the distance really helped me realize that I'm never going to be here forever, I tell the story often. I'm going to move my laptop for a second. I tell the story often to get a better reception for your Wi-Fi here. I tell the story often that my wife used to get motion sickness. She still does, but it was pretty serious, like when she was in school. And so she threw up on the bus every day of school, right? And so the bus driver would bring a bucket, like, for her to get sick in every day. And it was really funny, though, because she has a friend named Sarah, and they've been friends their whole lives. And it's from Sarah kind of elbowing my wife, Holly, and saying, hey, have you heard about that girl that throws up on the bus every day? And my wife's like, yeah, that's me. And so, but what I realized is that she stayed in the same place from kindergarten to high school, right? So she was always known as the person that threw up on the bus every day, in some way or another, And for me, it was like, if I was the guy that was the small guy that got beat up and picked on, in a matter of months I moved, I'm not that guy anymore. I can be whoever I want to be. So I learned a lot, and you could change how you wanted to change. So like I changed my name multiple times. I got called Daniel one place. Joseph is my first name. So I went by Joseph for a little while, went by Danny somewhere. I hated that. But yeah, you can change whatever you want to change about yourself, if you're not happy with it.
That's great. I really like that perspective you've taken.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that you yourself have such not only appreciation for thoughtfulness, but the time you do it daily, this thoughtfulness, and that your daughter and your wife are struggling from some forms of anxiety through life. Is there anything you go through your day that reminds you of how important it is for you to be able to help them, or strategies for you to help them, or anything like that? It can't be an easy task.
No, but it's really beautiful to watch. And this is what I've learned about anxiety, is that, one, I don't have it. And because I don't have it, it's really hard for me to help someone. And so if it wasn't for my wife, it'd be a way harder struggle, because she's been going through the process of changing her decision making, changing her thought process, changing her perspective in order to make a better life for our daughter. And she's being able to do it at the same time as our daughter. And it was
right.
interesting. Like we were in a counseling session. There's a great place here in Kentucky called the Harris Center, and they were working with my daughter Olive, and it was really interesting. So the counselor's in there with my daughter, and my wife and I and son are in the lobby waiting room, and my wife's reading a kid's book about perfectionism, and she just starts breaking down, and she's like, I didn't realize this is me. Like, I didn't realize this was something that was quote unquote not right, because like I've grown up with it, and my mom has it, and my sister has it, and this was normal, you know.
Right.
And so she didn't realize there was the availability to make a change. And as soon as that happened, as soon as she realized she could change it, that's when it really became something really powerful, because she realized she could be in control of the future of our family, you know. So it's interesting, because when I try and help, I usually do more harm than good, because it's coming from a different place, you know. And so I can't really understand it, because my wife will say something to my daughter. I'm like, I just said the same thing. And it's like, no,
right.
it came from her, and that really matters, you know. But yeah, I think it's really being more patient, and not patient like, you know, you're annoying me, or this is taking time and I have to hurry, I have to be somewhere, that kind of patience. But really understanding that, you know, what I say today matters in 10 years. About this idea, like I said, the garden. So if you see your family or your kids as this garden, you would never go out and urinate into your garden, right?
Right.
You would never throw your trash out in the garden.
Right.
What do you want for your garden is like the freshest stuff, the best care. You protect it from every kind of dangerous animal or bug, but you tend to that garden daily, knowing that what you put in is what's going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would I treat my kids in a way, or why would I put things into their bodies, their minds, that would harm the garden, right? And so we've started talking about that in ways that we can edit out those things. So we say, like, anxiety, there's something in the garden that needs to get taken care of. We can weed this stuff out, and it'll come back, but we're going to be diligent about weeding it out, you know? We're not just going to let it overtake to where we don't have any good fruit, you know?
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's a daily struggle, but it's gotten better. I mean, it's really improved. And that's just work, you know, that's time, that's investment. So
that's great. I have another question for you, interestingly, about your kids as well.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk recently, especially with the men's health movement and masculinity. There's a crisis of masculinity, people are saying. How do you deal with your daughter and your son any differently? Do you tell them anything different, specifically to your son, about this is what it means to be a man, to deal with emotions, and give him your experience, because your wife is a bit more in control and responsive to your daughter?
No, it's interesting, because I think that's mainly less talk but more actions.
Yep.
So it's really funny, because like my son is very much all boy, you know, likes to as well, but in a very different way. And so I try and show them that it's okay to obviously talk about your emotions, to show your emotions, to be vulnerable. And I think it's an awful thing to cut that off, right? As a man, to not talk, to not share, but also to not be affectionate is horrible. You know, like,
sure.
So I'm very affectionate with my kids. I cuddle with my kids anytime I can. You know, that's a super important thing for them to feel physically and emotionally kind of secure. But I think it's not as much gender. It's not about male and female with my kids. Mm-hmm. It is truly kind of the personalities. Because yeah, I could like raise my voice with my son and he'll get really emotional. My daughter, if I raise my voice in any way, she goes, "Dad," you know, and she gets very serious. Like, you shouldn't talk that way. And I'm like, you're right. You know what? You're right. And then I have to go find my son because he's really emotional and crying. And I'm like, I apologize, and we talk about things. But yeah, it's really funny. It's like, it's not what you would think sometimes. It's just personality. So I treat them the same, but I also have different expectations for them. because my daughter shares really easily. She'll talk like me for hours. Mm-hmm. Son, it's harder to pull things out of him. So it's the classic scenario, like, what'd you guys learn in school today? And my daughter will talk for like an hour about botany. I'm like, what'd you learn in school today? He's like, stuff. You know, it's like, so trying to train him to be able to talk openly and enjoy it, you know, but also respect his characteristics, you know, of being an individual.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's a weird place. Trying to confirm that I'm with you about masculinity. Is it freezing up?
No, you're good. Okay. You're good.
But yeah, it's weird about masculinity. Like this crisis of raising men to be men. You know, we're kind of cutting our feet out from under us in some way. But I also understand. I mean, I understand that like you don't want to raise really cheap boys and make bad men, but you want to raise high quality boys to be good, compassionate, vulnerable, strong men. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, they all can exist. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. Yeah. Really appreciate your time. If you want to give yourself a little plug on your Instagram and where people can find you.
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at line. But yeah, and on the internet, you can look at jdanielgraham or jdgraham.net. You can find all the artwork I do.
I think you should do the Instagram one more time. We paused up on it. Want to make sure people get that for you. No worries.
Instagram is lines, chisels, and brares. Yeah.
We got it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. It's a great time. Anytime we can chat, I'd love it.